But on the other hand, my job is pretty depressing for some of the same reasons, but also because I see the victims of these superbugs. I've met the victims who barely survived with their lives. And sadly, I've met parents who have lost their children to these superbugs. And this is just a cute name that we use for antibiotic-resistant bacteria. So these are bacteria that are resistant to our best antibiotics. But we're using 30 million pounds of antibiotics in food animal production each year. 30 million pounds. And the data, or the best estimates, suggest that only 20% of those antibiotics are being used to treat sick animals. 80% are being used as production tools. They're being used to make animals grow faster. They're being used to prevent diseases or treat diseases that are occurring just because of the way we're raising animals. The industry calls these production diseases. But rather than change production, we're just using antibiotics. And when it comes to antibiotic use, context is critical. So you have to look at how we're producing these animals. And if you're like me, this was your first image of a farm, right? And I think many of us carry this around. This is still propagated, right? The red barn, the silo, the happy little animals, pigs that look like dogs. They're odd, aren't they? But I love these toys. And this is clearly, this had a huge influence on my life, Fisher-Price. But this is not the way we raise animals in the United States. We raise animals in concentrated animal feeding operations. So pigs spend their entire lives on concrete. Alexander Fleming, we heard about this. Alexander Fleming warned us. He said ignorant men would use these drugs at low doses and create superbugs. And the science has proven this over and over again ever since then. He warned us in 19...
But we're currently in the middle of a global crisis where antibiotics are losing their effectiveness against infectious diseases. The headlines, if you could see them, are very alarming. Bacteria are rapidly becoming resistant to all of the antibiotics that we currently use.
Well, antibiotics were first really developed in the 1920s. Penicillin was one of the first marketed antibiotics, and it revolutionized healthcare. Widespread use, it took a while to develop antibiotics, but probably in the 40s, widespread use occurred, and illnesses that used to be fatal or cause serious complications were to be able to be treated with antibiotics. Like people used to die from strep throat, ear infections, certainly bacterial meningitis, those kinds of things. And with the use of antibiotics, we were able to save millions of lives, especially children's lives. So it did revolutionize healthcare. The problem over the years was widespread use of antibiotics for conditions that didn't need to be treated with an antibiotic. An antibiotic is an antibacterial drug used for a bacterial infection. And what started to happen was when they developed more and more antibiotics and more widespread use, they were being used for things other than bacterial infections. And so what happened was, the more you use antibiotics, you become resistant to them. And so we've developed between the 50s and the 70s, many classes of antibiotics were developed, and good antibiotics. But with overuse, we created situations where those first-line antibiotics weren't working. We had to go to a second-line antibiotic, and sometimes those antibiotics weren't working. They were resistant to the bacteria, and so we sprouted these superbugs. And so now we have several classes of what we call superbugs because they're antibiotic resistant. The biggest reason is, think about when you go to the doctor's office and you're feeling sick from maybe a common cold that's just lasting for a while. And so when you go to the doctor, you go because you're feeling pretty sick. And what do most people want when they go to the doctor? They want to get something that they think is going to make them feel better. And so that people demanded antibiotics. And physicians were quick to give antibiotics for many things. And what they're finding was a lot of the things that we were giving antibiotics for, your body could fight off those infections and you really didn't need the antibiotic. But the more you kept giving antibiotics, you created a resistance to that antibiotic. So some of the things that antibiotics don't work for, obviously, are viruses. So the common cold is a virus. Mononucleosis is a virus. You can sometimes when you have a virus and you can develop a bacterial infection that might need to be treated, but the actual virus is not going to, the antibiotic is not going to treat that illness in any way. In other cases, like when kids get frequent ear infections, they keep getting antibiotics. The ear infection usually will clear without an antibiotic, but if my own daughter had several bouts of ear infections as a child, and she pretty much became resistant to amoxicillin because she was taking it every few weeks, and so then we had to go to a stronger medication that had more serious side effects. And the other issue too is over the years, livestock producers for our food were using antibiotics to increase the growth of the animals to produce better food, and also using antibiotics to prevent any disease in their animals. And so many of the products, many of the food, our beef, our chicken, is infused with antibiotics. So we're ingesting antibiotics all the time too, without really knowing we're doing that. And so use of antibiotics in animals has definitely increased the antibiotic use, in our bodies too, and that's a big factor. What you and your family and anybody you know can do is not demand of your practitioner an antibiotic, or not. I guess to recognize when things, that people get sick, the common cold, for example, and nobody likes to be sick. There's ways to treat. That's a virus, and an antibiotic is not going to help that. Even a bronchitis, if it's viral bronchial, issue, even a viral pneumonia, there are some things we definitely have to use antibiotics for. We treat strep with an antibiotic because not just for the strep, but untreated strep can develop into a more serious condition called scarlet fever. We certainly treat bacterial meningitis, certain pneumonias, all those things need to be treated with an antibiotic. But when we go in and we're sick, and it's something that is viral or isn't going to be treated by an antibiotic, we have to be able to understand that certain viruses just have to run their course, and the common cold could take up to 10 days to really feel better. So there's ways to treat that common cold, but they're not antibiotics. So there's other ways. And when you go to a healthcare practitioner because you're feeling sick, not to feel cheated or that you're not given the right remedy if you don't come out with a medication. I like to say, we operate now in a system of better living through chemistry. Everybody wants a pill. They want instant relief. They want to feel better instantly, and they think a pill is going to solve that. And sometimes your body just has to go through that course of illness, and you have to rest and drink plenty of fluids and treat the symptoms of the sore throat, the headache, those things. But an antibiotic is not going to change the course of that illness. You need a pill to cure everything, and you have to be given an antibiotic, and all antibiotics. And the other thing is, sometimes an antibiotic, you can have some side effects too. I'm sure people in your class have taken an antibiotic and have had some stomach distress and some other things, and that when you need an antibiotic, you really need it, and you have to take it as prescribed. Finish your course of antibiotics. If you don't, you haven't really treated that bacteria, and it'll come right back, or it didn't go away. And that a lot of drugs have side effects, and there are ways to treat illnesses without medication. You want your meat, to be your cows, your chickens to be bigger, so they produce a bigger product, so you can make more money. And people, I think it wasn't very well known that livestock were being fed antibiotics prophylactically to prevent infection, but also to increase growth. And I think a lot of people didn't know that. So now when you go into the store, people that are really against antibiotics in their food, their food, their livestock source of food. We'll note in every grocery store organic. So organic usually means, with meat especially, that they weren't antibiotic fed. It'll say no antibiotics used. You'll see that on your chicken, your meat, your eggs. And some of organic means like no the fertilizer wasn't toxic either. But mostly it means, and you can look on the label, no antibiotics used in this product. So it's probably more expensive, but it's probably healthier for you. But most people don't eat. Most people, until really it came to light, the last few years, didn't understand that the food they were eating contained antibiotics. So, education about that.